I watched a movie recently and want to share this experience with you. Let's begin. This film, like many other Korean movies I watched, have an unexpected story twist. So let's get into it. A doctor moved somewhere in the suburban of a smaller city apparently. This area had a bad reputation due to unsolved crimes in the past. An old man, while being under anesthesia, spilled the beans about dismembering a human body. Now the doctor can't find peace. Most of the film we see events from the doctor's perspective, and combined with the proofs at the end, adding stress, debt, guilt, and addiction on top of all that, we understand now why it often seemed confusing, because character himself struggles with awareness about what is really happening here. Unreliable narrator, or how to call this method of storytelling more accurately. Well, anyway, at the end of the movie, we're restructuring all information about the scene events. Getting back to the beginning, doctor says that he got a scratch on his forehead from the accident with patient, but nurse was there when it happened, so she knew no way that would leave such a bruise. Then doc came up with new explanation. It was a medical dictionary that found him, said he doesn't have a bookshelf yet and just stacked his books by the bed. Maybe it's a sign that some tags beat him up a bit, since after the end of the film we find out about his debt. Doctor rented an apartment above the butcher shop. By all his belongings, golf club membership and the accompanying kid in particular, we understand that he used to be quite wealthy and successful. Getting early at work to decline some old subscriptions, his new boss mentioned that this town used to be a mecca of unsolved serial killings. In further conversation between them, we find out the dog sold his golf club membership to pay alimony. Later, we notice that his nurse have a fancy brand bag, saying that this is just a gift from a boyfriend. Old man from a butcher shop needs a colonoscopy, and our kind doctor agrees to do it, while everyone else go for a lunch break. Saying that he could finish up the procedure himself, nurse went out. And we hear how old man under anesthesia mumbling details about dumping a body. Quote, arms and legs at Hanam Bridge, torso and Danho Bridge. By doing that, they won't float till April. Fingerprint? If you're worried about it, cut off the fingers. Throw them away separately. The head is still in the fridge. After that, he noticed that man in the clinic hall. Same guy he seen on the bus at the beginning. By the way, throughout the whole movie, we see the doctor having problems with waking up on time. On the next day, Doc sees a nightmare about finding dismembered head in the butcher shop while falling asleep in the train on the way to meet his son. And that is the first confusing transition. Doc waking up to meet his son. We see nightmare episode that seems real. Then that shot in the train and again back to the butcher shop. Troubles with sleep and propofol addiction, as we know from the end, distort the doctor's perception. From the following episode with his son, we again confirms that Doc has troubles with money. Maybe the stock market story is simply a cover-up for a loan. And also, gossip goes that headless body was found at the Han River. On the next day, after late night beer with the younger butcher, in the news we see that another headless torso of the unknown female was found at the construction site. It had numerous blunt traumas with a sharp object. Is the old man still active as a serial killer? Doc meets up with his wife, and they end up arguing. Neighbor's noise complaint waking up the landlord, and while he's checking it up, he notices that Doc have a woman. After she leaves, young butcher brings up a new mirror and invites Doc for a drink later that night. So to the scene where they are drinking in the shop. Butcher fills the sleeping doctor's glass to the brim and goes off in search for more booze. In the next shot, when Doc awakens from the light, the glass is not as full as it was previously. This is a visual cue, hinting to the viewer that what we see in the next scene is not real. Then, as we see it in the moment, he wakes up from nightmares about finding the head in the butcher's refrigerator. Old man arrived to do a vaccine and somehow noticed the killer in the doctor's eyes, saying that the first time is always hard, but once you start you can't stop. Somehow the old butcher knows what Doc was up to recently. While listening patients chat about old butcher, how ex-wife of his son disappeared, he again noticed that man in the clinic. Right after that, police coming up, asking about new foreign workers that came recently, since DNA analysis concluded that the victim is a Southeast Asian. Like the butcher's ex, by the way. Mysterious man disappears. Doctor's love for detective stories explains his theoretical knowledge about getting away with crime. And as old man said, you'll need to drop the head of the victim in a different place. Maybe that's why Doc leaves it in the freezer, because he didn't find the right spot yet. And on the opposite, as viewers, before you see proofs at the end of the film, we read this scene otherwise. Like he took this head from the butchers as an evidence, figuring out the right way to prove their crimes to local authorities. When in reality, he had this head with him for 3 months or so at this point. His nurse asked him if he was sleeping in the clinic again, During this conversation, we find out that dogs have slept in the back room for a couple of nights, saying that this is because a border break, when in reality, he can't stand to sleep at his rent place, where this mammoth head in the fridge awaits him to deal with it, also adding the fear of being killed by the butchers to that. Another confusing nightmare. His damaged consciousness builds a picture how butchers killed a woman in his apartment, confirming for himself the origin of the severed head in the fridge. He is trying to figure out the way how to set up the butchers for the kill they didn't commit, for the death of that lady that our doctor took loan from. And after that shot with newspaper, when he saw an article about serial killings, that they started again, yeah, he'll definitely try to come up with such idea. In the next scene, walking down the street, Doc notices how Butcher's son getting beat up, because he is mixed blood apparently. At the end of the film, that scene is shown to us from a different perspective. How Doc beat up a doctor because of his death, while Butcher's son notices it from the distance. Looks like the doctor's mind is just imagining this story that will confirm his version of events in the future, where he is innocent. Getting back to the clinic late at night, Doc sees how his nurse is stealing drugs. Now we know that fancy bag didn't come from no boyfriend. Getting back from work the next day, he is noticed a note on the doors of the butcher shop that says, "Off for 3 days due to personal matter." But strange enough, there is a truck parked nearby with fresh blood on it. Noise that comes from the back of the shop attracts his attention. Checking it in, he thinks that they are getting rid of the body, turning the remains into mincemeat. On the way out, Butcher notices him and they have a chat, from which we find out that his wife gone home for a few days after they had an argument. And since they can't run the shop without her, he took a break, dealing with the new shipment of meat. It's been a while since he last worked on a whole cow, therefore he accidentally cut himself using bad tools, since the good ones was stolen by the doctor during the night when they had a drink. Confused by the question about the head, at the end of the conversation, Butcher asks if the lady from the other night get back home okay. Doc says, yeah, of course. Now Butcher knows that doctor is not aware his wife went missing yet. Returning to the apartment, the police arrived a minute later, asking the doctor about his ex-wife. Now we know the doctor was slept in the clinic for 4 days, and he was the last person who seen his ex-wife. His nurse, worried by police asking about the doctor, went up right after them. Realizing that he didn't tell them about her, she went home. Worrying about nurse getting back home that late, Doc noticed how young Butcher is following her. We think that he wants to kill her at the moment, but seeing that scene again, maybe he was just trying to find out about what's going on with the next propofol shipment. And with Doctor chasing them, it would be a trouble to explain the situation, so he knocks him out. Good for him that Mystery Man was right behind, saving Doc from troubles. He introduces himself as an inspector, retired police officer, opening up about suspecting butchers from downstairs for serial killings. How this scene looks too, well, it's like from detective books, too unreal, too obvious and straightforward for a real-life conversation. By the way, the inspector mentions that recent body that was found doesn't match their killing method somehow. Whole conversation between them is filled with explanation of what is really going on when we watch that movie again. Seems like young Butcher moved unconscious doctor back to the apartment, and that conversation with inspector was inside the doctor's distorted mind. In a way, his consciousness was trying to make up a version of events that will remove that guilt from him for killing a person to get rid of his debt. His son wants to meet him, being upset with grandma talking bad about his father. He is already here, near the butcher shop. With risk that his son will find out that head in the fridge, he tells him to get a cab or a bus and meet him at work. Young Butcher sees the kid at the bus stop and decides to use Dr. Son as a leverage to get his stolen tools back and keep Doc silent with his suspicions. Because of that, Doc rides to his apartment, grabbing scalpel from his desk with him, calling that inspector, asking him to help, when in reality that is the number of his psychiatrist. Doc notices light at his window and runs upstairs, but little he knew, it was not the butcher. Running away, he was hit by the inspector car. Inspector says that his son is fine, he is with grandma. Newspaper tells that his wife is dead, and police is searching for ex-husband. Seems like Ops was tipped by the neighbor. Doctor, thinking that he is talking to inspector, tells him all information about the head in the fridge, and about the opportunity to close that 15 years old case of his. But in the next moment, he noticed a name, and that name doesn't match the one that inspector introduced himself with. Doc knocks him out, thinking that this inspector is a liar that wants to set him up. During the night, Doctor breaks into the butcher shop, searching for evidence. After a fight with young Butcher, Doc sees only cow's head. His apartment was searched. His colleagues at work only confirm his weird behavior, as well as everyone else. claiming him with propofol addiction, which he stole from the clinic. Butcher says the doctor might have stolen his knife that night they were drinking, and indeed looks like he is. This story with condemning doctor's son was just a misunderstanding. Kind landlord was just trying to make things right between them by giving a ride to his son, counting on getting his tools back in exchange. Young Butcher's son confirms doctor's odd behavior, telling the story how he witnessed Doc getting beat up. Anyway, police get a solid story, and before reveal evidence to our doctor, we hear other version of these events from him. How he was trying to find a proof that butchers are indeed serial killers, how he stole the head from them and keep it in the fridge, continuing his story by telling them about that inspector that was always around. Who knows, maybe he was with the butchers, covering up for them. After he mentions the day his nurse went missing, he gets interrupted. Policeman saying that his nurse is fine, and even more, she claims that our doctor was stealing drugs from the clinic and have addiction to propofol. On top of that, she says the doctor spoke in his sleep about murders, that he killed a woman and her head was still in the fridge. Back that night when she came up to his place to say about police looking for him at the work, right after she mentioned that she saw him with his wife at the ice cream shop, he changed. And scaring for her life, she went back home right away. Then noticed that he is following her. She knocked him out. That's why she didn't came to work next morning. She was scared to see him again after all of that. Doc realizes that she is trying to frame him to get away with stealing herself. And even more, she must have sold that propofol to the butcher. That explains how her fake story is so prepared. They're against him together. He is trying to explain all of that by mentioning her fancy bags. How much nerves make at this job? How does she find a lover who will give her $5,000 back? But then his long story came up. How he borrowed $200,000 to open his clinic. A headless torso that surfed on a Han River last month. DNA test matches with the head from the doctor's fridge. The head is preserved so well that it's recognizable. It belonged to a woman Doc borrowed money from. And that guy was there that day trying to confirm it. He is saying that she suffered from insomnia and only propofol helped her. So she got it from our doctor in exchange of debt interest. When that guy couldn't reach her next day, he went to the clinic and found her car in the parking lot. He checked the dash cam and the tape says it all. She died from drug overdose. They set out the story together and agreed on the debt at $200,000. Then our doc lost a lot of money on gambling, so he went to see him. But his clinic was closed and he was gone. He tracked him down later on and find out that he still has her head. Next proof is that mysterious inspector. This in reality appears to be his colleague and therapist. Looks like that imaginary person came from the book's pages. After all of that, we see what's happened to his ex-wife that day. At the moment of intimacy, he sees the person he killed instead of his ex-wife. After seeing his addiction, she leaves his apartment. Old man with dementia, missing good old days of killing people and getting away with it, killed doctor's ex-wife. His son decides to cover for him, and since he was buying propofol from the nurse, he used her to stick up to his story about weird new doctor. She agrees to play along with this legend, since she need to get away with stealing medicine. With all that testimony, of course no one gonna believe him for not killing his ex-wife. One thing is yet not clear to me, if he took that knives or not. There is a point in stealing them to put on evidence and drop it back at the butcher shop, along with the head, to set them up for good and get away with murder himself. But from the other hand, if the butcher put them in to confirm his own version of events and set up the doctor for killing his wife, then where and how he cuts his hand? Maybe while getting rid of the doctor's ex-wife body, cleaning up after his father. Version with cow sounds good, but I don't know. Well, anyway. Old man kept the ring of doctor's ex-wife and gave it to his son's second wife. Butcher's son moved to Philippines to learn English and to meet his mom. Only we as viewers had an opportunity to notice all details of that complex story. What a script, magnificent work. While editing this video, I've noticed a few things. That shot when Doc glanced at the camera could be another hint from the creators. Because we know that story from his nurse is a lie. And like before, in this scene with the glass of soju, we have a hint from the creators that this scene is unreal. We have same glance at the camera in the scene with the inspector. They really left us some tips to follow. I only wonder what details I could have missed or misread. Indeed, what a script.